It began with the sound of hollow wood. Not the ordinary creak of old planks, but a deep, muffled knock, as though something far beneath the church had stirred. Martha heard it first. She was alone that morning, sweeping the nave, when her broom caught on a splinter between the pews. The sound came up through her shoes, faint, but deliberate. 1, 2, pause. Then nothing. The church was always cold before Mass, even in summer. The air clung to her hands, numbing her knuckles. She could see her breath in the light that fell through the high, narrow windows. It had always been her favorite time, when the village was still half asleep, the church smelling faintly of candle wax and wet stone. But that morning, the smell was different. It was faint, but wrong. Not incense. Not damp wood. Something older. She told Father Anselm about the noise, though she kept the smell to herself. He smiled the way priests did when speaking to children, and said old floors complain in the cold. Still, he fetched a lantern and knelt by the spot she'd pointed out, running his fingers along the seam in the boards. The knock came again. This time they both heard it. By midday, the carpenter had been sent for. His name was Emil, a quiet man whose boots always carried sawdust. He arrived with his tools wrapped in cloth, muttering that he'd repaired this same stretch of floor not 3 winters ago. When the first board was pried loose, a draught of air escaped, dry, but heavy, as though it had been trapped for centuries. The smell deepened. It was no longer faint. They expected soil beneath, perhaps a root cellar, perhaps a rat's nest. Instead, they found stone. A narrow slab, carved smooth. The priest frowned. "There should be nothing here," he said softly, as though speaking too loudly might wake something. They cleared the opening carefully, lifting the boards one by one until the stone beneath lay bare. It was the size of a coffin, though no one dared say it aloud. In the dim light of the lantern, faint lines could be seen, shallow etchings worn by time. Martha stood behind the others, clutching her apron. The carvings were strange, looping shapes that made her eyes ache if she followed them too long. "Cover it again," Father Anselm said at last. But Emil only shook his head. "If the ground shifts, the whole nave could be at risk." The slab was lifted. The hollow beneath was deeper than the eye could see. The lantern's light vanished into it as though swallowed by water. From somewhere far below, a sound rose, soft, uneven, like cloth dragging across stone. The carpenter muttered a prayer. The priest stepped back. Martha thought she saw movement in the darkness, but the longer she stared, the more certain she became that it was only her own breath clouding the air. They lowered the lantern down on a rope. It swayed gently, illuminating walls that were too smooth to be natural. At the bottom lay a second floor of stone, and upon it, shapes. Bundles. Wrapped tightly in something dark. That night, Martha could not sleep. The sound of the hollow knock seemed to follow her, faintly at first, then closer, as if her own house stood above the same kind of floor. She told herself it was only in her head, until she noticed the smell again, seeping through the shutters. The next morning, when she arrived at the church, the boards had been nailed back in place. Father Anselm's face was pale. Emil was gone. When she asked what had been done with what they'd found, the priest simply said, there was nothing there. Yet she could see the lantern's rope lying in the corner, frayed at the end. Weeks passed. The knocking did not return. The smell did. Always in the early hours, before the bells rang. Martha began to notice other things, the way the candles near that part of the nave burned lower, their wax pooling faster, the way the stone beneath the altar seemed to hold a faint warmth even in winter. Sometimes, when she swept near the boards, she thought she felt a faint pull beneath her feet, as if the ground itself were breathing. One evening in late autumn, after the last parishioner had gone, Martha lingered by the altar, listening. The church was silent except for the settling of wood. She let her hand rest on the floorboards where they had been replaced. It was warm. And then, faintly, 3 knocks. Slower this time. That night, the bells rang in the small hours, though no one had pulled the rope. Villagers gathered in the square, looking to the church. Its doors stood open. Candlelight flickered inside. On the steps lay the boards from the nave, torn up one by one. Inside, the hole gaped wide again. The lantern still burned at the bottom, though no one claimed to have lit it. And beside it, a second rope, leading upward into the shadows above the altar, swaying gently, as if something had only just climbed out.